from across the globe.
See it over the air and on Comcast and Verizon.
Programs on MPT are made possible by our members and the following.
UMBC offers professional applied master's degrees, where learning with industry colleagues is enhanced with a wealth of network connections. Claim your future.
University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, leading the way on Chesapeake Bay restoration, while guiding our state, nation, and world toward a more sustainable future.
Making complicated healthcare decisions for the ones we love can feel overwhelming. The Maryland Healthcare Commission is here to help. It's a state agency whose mission includes helping you make informed healthcare choices. The MHCC website allows you to review and compare options like assisted living, nursing homes, and hospitals. These aren't easy decisions, but it's better to be prepared. To learn more, visit healthcarequality.mhcc.maryland.gov.
This program is made by MPT to enrich the diverse communities throughout our state and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Welcome to State Circle. Tonight, could it happen a third time in a row? Maryland governor's mansion was long controlled by the Democratic Party, but Republican Larry Hogan won the last two elections. Tonight, we'll meet the Republicans who hope to succeed him, beginning with Kelly Schultz.
And I talk about being safe, steady, and prosperous. And safety, because without the idea of safe streets and safe communities, nothing else matters. And then education, making sure that we have steady educational leadership, which is why I put forth a parental bill of rights. And basically, Jeff, what it is being able to make sure that parents are empowered in their children's educational process in the public education system. And every child has the right to a world-class education, regardless of the zip code that they live in. But also that taxpayers deserve some transparency when it comes to the quality of the education and how those taxpayer dollars are being spent, because what it all leads to is personal prosperity. And we talk about affordability and lower taxes and being able to make sure that businesses have the continuation of being able to create good, well-paying jobs for our hardworking families across the state.
The Republican Party obviously deeply divided right now. How would you describe yourself? Are you a Hogan Republican, a mainstream, you mentioned business, a pro-business Republican? Would you say you're an anti-Trump Republican?
I'd like to say that I'm a Kelly Schultz Republican. And a lot of people ask me that question. I'm super focused on 2022, being able to make sure that we do continue with some of the policies, but also have a re-energy of some of those policies that, quite honestly, I have been very successful in putting forward while in the Hogan administration, mainly in workforce development, job creation, and business growth. And that's what we have to be able to focus on, along with our safe streets and our educational system. But listen, I'm running a campaign, and I'm running to win this campaign, both in July and in November. And I will say there's lots of other guys that are running for governor, but I would say that I'm different. I'm the only Republican candidate who can win in November and continue to move Maryland in the right direction. But also the other guys on the other side, they want to do things to move Maryland in a different direction. They want to increase taxes. They have no realistic plans for tackling crime, and they want to have more control over our children's education. But me, I want to cut your taxes. I want to make Maryland more affordable, our communities safer, and empower parents.
You have the endorsement of the sitting governor, the hero of Maryland Republicans, Larry Hogan. So it's been a little bit surprising that you've had to spend some valuable campaign resources at this stage in the primary on attack ads against Dan Cox, who has the Trump endorsement. That would indicate to people that you guys think this race may be close. Well, listen, a campaign is a campaign, and we're not taking anything for granted. We have
We've raised historical amount of funds for a non-incumbent Republican. There's many, many people across the state, thousands and thousands, that have invested in my campaign because not only do they know that I'm the right Republican to continue to move Maryland forward, but they also know that I'm the right candidate overall to move Maryland forward because of the successes that we have had. And I would also like to say that there's many, many positive ads that we put out there because getting the message, our message to Marylanders, no matter where they live, is hugely important. And sometimes, Marylanders and people across the country, voters, they don't pay attention until the end of the day. And we want to be able to make sure that they have all of the positive information that they can about Kelly Schultz and how we're going to continue on a positive path.
Let me ask about one hot button issue, the abortion issue that is going to be more in the news in the next couple of weeks when the Supreme Court releases its Roe v. Wade opinion. The last 50 years, I don't think anyone's been elected statewide in Maryland who hasn't been a supporter of maintaining or maybe expanding abortion rights. Governor Hogan sort of threaded the needle on that. Where do you stand?
Well, I'm personally pro-life. 30 years ago, Marylanders voted to make abortion legal in Maryland. And any decision forthcoming on Roe versus Wade coming out of the Supreme Court will not change that. And as governor, nothing will change with respect to current Maryland law on this issue.
Let's talk about the environment a little bit. This has been apparently it's early in the crab season, but it's been pretty tough. The numbers are down. When you think about the importance of the Chesapeake Bay, I'll ask you to talk about that broadly a little bit. But in terms of crabs, which people around here are really fond of, is it time to think about a limit on the harvest, specifically the harvest of female crabs?
Well, first of all, I want to say that, of course, the health and the productivity that comes from the Chesapeake Bay and all of our environmental resources across the state are hugely important, not just because they create revenues. Obviously, agriculture is our #1 industry in the state of Maryland, and the crab industry is very important to that. Maryland is world famous for what we're able to produce. But I have the full support of Maryland's watermen, and they have formed a coalition. So I would love to be able to sit down with them in the future to talk about what their experiences are. But I will say that these agricultural communities, which this is included in, are a big part of community development in ways in which our traditions have upheld in Maryland, and we'll want to continue that and balance it with what is happening in the environmental community with the fishing that's going on with the crab community.
I know that watermen are especially attuned to this issue, the cost of gasoline. We're all paying $5 a gallon at this point. Would you support what Comptroller Francho has called for, another 90-day suspension of the gas tax, or are you perhaps more focused on needing that money in the Highway Trust Fund?
I'm focused on eliminating what I call the inflation tax. Back in 2013, the legislature voted on this gas increase, and I was in the legislature at that point in time, and I resoundingly voted no against this tax increase because not only does it increase the tax, but it also increases the percentage of the tax as inflation rises. And as we have seen our increase in inflation at a record 18%, this is because of partisan legislators. They index the gas to the inflation, and we can't have that. I vow to be able to remove the inflation tax altogether. And this is why, Jeff, because I was a single mom. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like to struggle. And yes, there are businesses and industries all across the state and across the nation that are struggling with the high increase in unaffordable now energy products. And I want to be able to make sure that hardworking Marylanders and businesses have the ability to continue to prosper, because that's what it's all about. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's tough. I've been there. And I want to be able to make sure that we decrease all of those costs for the taxpayer.
Let me ask you a question that was asked by one of the panelists in our Democratic debate, and that's character. I mean, think about a time in your life. Tell us about a time where maybe you had a personal struggle that you overcame. Maybe you had a mistake that you had to revisit and learn from. When I bring up character in the context of gubernatorial leadership, what comes to mind?
Well, it's kind of where I began, actually. You know, I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan, in a city called Warren, Michigan, and I was going to be the first person in my family to go and graduate from college. And I did. I went to school, and in my sophomore year at university, I got pregnant. I dropped out of college. I got married. I spent the next 15 years of my life raising my two boys and doing everything that I could in order to be able to make the family whole. And I did that by waiting tables, tending bar, doing anything that I could in order to be able to increase the opportunities for my boys and my family. Now, I would never say that that was a mistake. I would never say that I made wrong choices. I made the right choices. I'm hoping that people all across Maryland understand that the choices we make can lead you into a direction where we can determine different types of opportunities. And with that, 15 years later, when I was 36 years old, I ended up being the first person from my family to graduate from college. And that was a huge momentum for me. It was a great message to deliver to my boys, who were then old enough to watch their mom walk across the stage with a cap and gown, knowing how important it is to follow our dreams and continuing to work hard.
Our thanks to Secretary Schultz, and we should note that Republican candidate Dan Cox had been scheduled for an interview this week but had to reschedule. We're hoping to bring that to you next week. Now, MPT's Nancy Amata spoke with candidate Robin Ficker.
Robin Ficker, you're one of 4 candidates running for the Republican gubernatorial nomination. You served one term in the House of Delegates in the late 70s and 80s. And over the years, you've launched a lot of political campaigns and ballot initiatives. Tell us about why you are interested in becoming governor.
We have 8.6% inflation. We have $5 gasoline. We need to give a fiscal stimulus to the average Maryland family, and that's what I'm going to do. We're going to cut the sales tax 2 cents or by 1/3, saving every Maryland household $780 each and every year. No other candidate is promoting a tax cut like this. We'd be the first state ever to cut the sales tax. That'll be a fiscal stimulus for households and also act as a lure for all the big companies, every one of which is shunning Maryland for jobs.
Online, you're described as a colorful Montgomery County defense attorney who was recently disbarred from practicing law. You've also made headlines as a high-volume heckler at Washington Bullets and then Wizards games. What would you say to alleviate any concern that voters might have about your conduct or temperament?
Look, I've completed 40,000 cases in Maryland courts. I've overturned 4 state laws in federal courts, laws that were passed unanimously by the Maryland legislature and certified as constitutional by the Attorney General, although they weren't. And I've gotten things done, passed questions relating to term limits on property tax, revenue increases, kept garbage dumps and sewage sludge trenching out of residential zones. I've gotten problems with some of the judges because I've been arguing against their viewpoints on behalf of clients. My clients love me, and I'm going to be a very good governor for all.
In so many ways, despite the pandemic, Maryland is actually in pretty great shape, at least fiscally. In your mind, where does Maryland fall short? What issues do you believe are most important that we address?
Well, let me just name in the past few years some of the companies that have avoided Maryland with multi-billion-dollar expansions. Amazon, Apple, Boeing, Facebook, Global Foundries, Google, Intel, Microsoft, Nucor Steel, Samsung, Taiwan Semiconductor, Hyundai, Texas Instruments, Toyota. They've had multi-billion-dollar expansions. Google is spending $9.5 billion in capital projects in the United States this year, not $1 in Maryland, although one of their founders graduated from UMD. The State Department of Commerce has done nothing, and our economic strike force, our job strike force, is going to go out and bring some of these jobs back from these big companies.
Let's talk about some other issues, education being one of them. The lawmakers approved the blueprint for Maryland's future, and certainly there needs to be a lot addressed when it comes to infrastructure and also how to get kids caught up from the learning loss from the pandemic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you've asked a number of questions there. It's true that we have a $34 billion unfunded mandate, and we can't tax ourselves out of that. We have to bring in some companies to improve our revenue base. Amazon just located 25,000 jobs, averaging $155,000 each, not in Maryland, in Northern Virginia. I know people in the legislature want to spend money, but they can't use the taxpayer as an ATM. We've got 8.6% inflation. That's a tax increase every day. We need to cut our sales tax and give every family a $780 fiscal stimulus and bring in some big companies.
Let's talk about crime, especially in Baltimore. Violent crime is up all over the country, and certainly here in Maryland as well. What can be done that is not being done, do you believe? There's been so much discussion at the legislature, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of consensus among Republicans and Democrats.
Well, Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona is a good friend of mine. He was able recently to increase state salaries and cut taxes. How did he do that? He brought in a $12 billion plant from Taiwan Semiconductor and a $20 billion plant, the largest private investment in Arizona history, from Intel. Now, if we had a $20 billion plant from Intel outside of Baltimore, some of these guys who'd be playing around otherwise with guns and fentanyl would be earning $60 an hour making semiconductors. We need to bring in jobs, and we haven't been doing that. Nucor Steel just made the largest private investment in West Virginia history with a steel sheet plant and a plant making steel rods. That would have been great for Allegheny County and Garrett County, two of our poorest counties. We haven't been getting the jobs, and the state government and State Department of Commerce haven't cared at all.
What are your thoughts on specifically on Baltimore, the city of Baltimore? There's been some, certainly from Republicans seem to feel that Democrats are too soft on crime, that they're focusing on the wrong things.
Well, I'm tired of everyone trying to kick Baltimore. I'd like to bring in the Baltimore Bombers, a new NBA team, make Baltimore a sports town. Baltimore can be a wonderful place. We need to bring in some big employers. Bethlehem Steel left. What took its place? We need to bring in a semiconductor plant. We need to bring in an EV battery plant. Hyundai just decided to build a $5.5 billion car battery plant in Georgia. Toyota decided to build a multi-billion-dollar car battery plant in North Carolina. Where was the Maryland Department of Commerce? If the people of Baltimore have jobs, they can pay their rent. We won't have a lot of torn down housing, and then they can support their family and be happy and productive.
Despite having elected a Republican governor for the last 2 terms, Maryland is still solidly a blue state. Do you see that changing?
Well, as a defense attorney who represented over 25,000 minorities, as someone who's placed questions on the ballot to bring about term limits and property tax limits, as someone who graduated from the University of Baltimore Law School, I think I have broad bipartisan appeal. I've spent the last 3 years on the boardwalk in Ocean City, meeting well over 50,000 people from all Maryland jurisdictions, learning what Maryland's need and how I can help them get it.
Robin Ficker, anything else you'd like to say? This is your pitch to talk to the voters who are still undecided in this election.
Well, I don't think you want someone who has a lot of youth and inexperience. You want someone who's gotten things done. And that's what I've done. I've gotten ballot measures passed in totally democratic counties, the biggest county, most liberal county in Maryland. I can work with anyone. I can work with the Trump people and the Hogan people. They've been going at each other. We need someone to unite our party and move Maryland ahead with JOBS.
Robin Ficker, Republican candidate for governor. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nancy. Now our conversation with Joe Werner, also running for the Republican gubernatorial nomination.
I grew up in Fells Point, and then I moved to Harford County. We've been around here for 4 or 5 generations, and in Harford County, Baltimore County. I now live in the eastern part of Baltimore County. So I know Maryland, I know Baltimore, and I love Baltimore, and I want to see it work. So the other candidates, a lot of them are from somewhere else. They don't understand or care about Baltimore. They just use it as a political place to think, oh, I want to get votes out of Baltimore. Both Democrats and Republicans will talk about Baltimore in a lot of different ways. So I actually love Baltimore. I would consider myself a moderate today, but by today's standards, moderates are somewhat conservative. My top priorities would be safety and schools, and it kind of all ties together, because if you have good schools, then you're going to have better job opportunities, and then you have less crime. So but you need police on the streets to stop the crime, and you need a good state's attorney. So it'd be crime and schools and taxes.
Well, let's start with schools then. So during the pandemic, school kids had a rough time. Test scores show that many have fallen way behind. How, as governor, would you help them catch up?
Right off, I would have been against lockdowns. I've been against the mask mandates. I'm against mandates for vaccines, especially for children under the age of 18. I would then have what they call charter schools, voucher schools. I would do a couple things. We have such a great state with Johns Hopkins. We got Towson University. We've got all these people on the cutting edge of education technology. Why aren't we remodernizing or modernizing the schools and looking at the way we teach things? We teach subjects in the same way we did basically 100 years ago when we were preparing everyone for the farm or a factory. What we should learn about is just thinking, how to think, not what to think. Also, what I would do with the children is I would increase the school day. I would put some more tutors, and I would have Hopkins and Towson looking at how we can best educate our children. And if you let the money follow the child, you'll get excellence in schools because you'll get competition. Competition breeds innovation. We have competition in business. We should have competition in politics, and we definitely need it in the school system. That would help us out tremendously.
You said you were against vaccine mandates. Do you see any situations where, maybe not even in terms of COVID, but any situation where a vaccine should be mandatory?
At this point, I really don't. But if smallpox were to come back, we know that vaccine works. So if we ever see a rise in smallpox, well, yeah, I would say because we have a proven vaccine. The COVID vaccines are experimental. And then they said, well, we're going to give you a vaccine, and then we'll give you a second one, then we'll give you a booster, we'll give you a third one, we're going to give you a fourth one. And they don't even know what it does. Like they said, there's a lot of negative impacts of people on, like younger people having the heart conditions and whatever. We don't know. So when I got vaccinated, when I was young, we vaccinated from all kinds of things, but you get one shot and that was for your life. Or I got the shingles vaccine. So it's like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I go get vaccines, but I wanted to make sure it works, and the government doesn't make you do it. Like you can't get a job, you can't get a transplant. I was over the top.
Gun violence, top issue for many people. We've seen horrible tragedies, mass shootings lately, continuing near daily violence in Baltimore. What would your answer be?
It seems like it's kind of complex and simple at the same time. Like everyone worries about children. I have children in elementary school. And when they say to me, can this happen here in Maryland? Then you want to say no, but it can. And what you say about gun violence is it's not the gun or gun violence. It's people who have mental illness issues, and it's people who are just plain old evil, and people who can get away with it. What I would do first off is I would put violent repeat offenders in prison. And with the gun violence in the schools, the assault weapons ban or assault weapons get at 18. I would move that up to 21. And the reason why is because if you're 18 and you have a series of mental health issues, it's not going to show up in a background check when you're 18. It's going to show up when you're 21. I want to make sure the person who's getting a weapon isn't mentally unstable. Also, I would have the Department of Public Safety. I would have them I would expand their role. I say every school has a public safety officer. It's an armed, trained police officer, someone who really knows how to handle a weapon. Also in the schools, I'd have volunteers. If a principal or vice principal wants to have a weapon, they should be able to take it to school. And as far as like the guy in Florida, 21 times the police went and talked to him. Now, as they would say, he's acting crazy, or he's mentally ill, or he's acting strange, but it's not illegal. But what we should do is have like the Department of Public Safety, then the police go out and say, we can't do anything. I think the person has mental issues. Send out a trained officer who's trained in mental health, who's trained to spot, what's happening there. And also have like a state attorney or someone through the Attorney General's office who specializes in involuntary commitments. Civil commitments can work just as good as criminal commitments. If you go out and this person's not a criminal, but they're a danger to themselves or others, and they're they have mental health issues, you can put them in a hospital. And the thing is, take the mentally ill that are violent off the streets. And that would be the first step towards getting it done.
You said you'd want to move the assault weapons purchase age up from 18 to 21. That's not a popular view in the Republican Party nationally.
And I know. I have views that are not popular with the Democrats or the Republicans. Again, like we were talking about earlier, if you're a moderate, like Eisenhower said, you got nowhere to hide. And in the primary, that's who's going to be out there voting. It's like, I'm pro-gun. I mean, I'm Second Amendment, but I think there should be some reasonable restrictions. I don't see anything wrong. There was a Republican saying there is no age limit in the Constitution on weapons. Well, I say, well, then do you feel like an 11-year-old should be able to have a weapon? I mean, obviously there is an age limit somewhere.
So in this Republican primary, the Republican Party split, obviously. In this primary, you have Trump endorsing one of your opponents. You have Governor Hogan endorsing another opponent. Is there room for your candidacy in there somewhere?
Yeah, I really think there is, because Hogan's very popular when they just say, do you like what he's doing, and he gets 60% or whatever. But when you look at the other polls, the University of Maryland poll, I mean, Kelly is getting around 21, 22% in the polls. Yet it's not hard support, it's soft support. So people really aren't lining up for her after all those years and all that money. And Cox too, he's down around 12, anywhere from 12 to 20%. And he's got all this money and he touts Trump, yet it's not really doing much for him. So I think, I'm a new outsider who could get in there.
Let me ask a question that we asked of Democratic candidates recently, and that's personal character qualities, personal leadership qualities. An example of maybe a time where you made a mistake and you learned from that, or you overcame a big problem. What comes to mind there?
Well, you know what? I was like, I never made mistakes, but I did. So right off, I haven't thought about it, because I guess I move on. But business, I went to Florida for a little while, opened up a law firm. It didn't do so well, so I came back to Washington where I could do better. I guess that's a little something. And I don't, right off, I can't think about it. I don't know. I put it out of my mind and move forward.
Our thanks to Mr. Werner. That is State Circle for this week. Join us Monday for Direct Connection and your chance to ask the experts. That's coming up Monday evening at 7. And now for all of us at MPT, thank you for watching and have a good night.
Since 2014, the Maryland Energy Administration Solar Canopy Grant has added over 20,000 kilowatts of solar generation to the state, which is enough energy to power over 2,100 Maryland homes. Learn more at energy.maryland.gov.
If you see someone overdosing, call 911. The good